Now we were going into 101 places to visit in Peru that aren't Machu Picchu. This is the Arequipa edition. Arequipa is in southern Peru, so we zoom in here. It's about an hour flight from Lima. Isolated in its own fertile valley between deserts and mountains and distant from Lima, Arequipa is built from volcanic rock that spewed out from the majestic El Misti volcano, seen here, one of three volcanoes overlooking the city. In colonial days, Arequipa had a larger Criollo population, that means the Spanish descended people, and smaller indigenous population than other places in Peru. So Arequipa has a stronger European tradition and fewer indigenous traditions than other places. The residents are fiercely proud of their city and they think of themselves as somewhat separate from, and well, we'll just come right out and say it. They really feel superior to Peruvians in the rest of the country. Arequipa's Plaza de Armas is one of the most beautiful in Peru. Here, Arequipeños gather to hear political speeches, walk back and forth with their friends, conduct protests, and attend street fiestas. The two-story colonnades in Arequipa's Plaza de Armas surround three sides of the plaza. Note Arequipa is in mountains, but at 7,600 feet above sea level, most people should not have any issues with altitude sickness here in Arequipa. Buildings on Arequipa are made of white CR stone, which comes from the surrounding volcanic mountains. This stone gives Arequipa its nickname, the White City, and nowhere is the city more pearly white than here in the Yanaguara district. One of the most spectacular sites in Arequipa is the Monasterio de Santa Catalina. It's a city within a city, with one or two room cells that has been home to up to 500 Dominican nuns since 1579. After the 1960s, the dwindling order built more up-to-date quarters on the premises. It was Spanish tradition during Peru's viceroyalty era that the second son or daughter enter into lifelong service in the church. First sons usually received the family's inheritance. Novice nuns had to prove their Spanish origins and pay a dowry of 1,000 gold pesos, worth about $150,000 today, to enter the convent. They were also required to bring particular items, including religious statues, paintings, clothing, lamps, along with them when they entered the convent. Thus, Santa Catalina Monastery became a center of cloistered nuns from wealthy families in Peru. After the nuns built themselves new housing in the 1960s, several nonprofit agencies got together and restored the old monastery and installed running water and electricity. In 1970, the cloisters, plazas, communal rooms, and private cells were open to the public. As tourists discover, if the nuns had any vows of silence and poverty, they were not very closely followed. Today, visitors can look back on 4 centuries and find that the convent's rooms were sometimes furnished with English carpets, silk curtains, and tapestry-covered furniture. It is easy to spend a half a day or longer exploring the many terracotta red, cornflower blue, and snowy white spaces of Santa Catalina. Here's a street scene in Arequipa behind the cathedral, a beautiful church in town, a woman on the sidewalk in Arequipa, a silver shop. Two well-known Peruvians are from Arequipa, twice President Fernando Belaunde and Nobel Prize winner in literature Mario Vargas Llosa. Discovering the Ice Maiden in September 1995, the glacier on a 20,000-foot volcano had been melted from a nearby eruption, revealing the mummified remains of an Inca human sacrifice to their mountain gods. The archaeologists found a perfectly preserved 550-year-old sacrificed body, mummified by the dryness and cold. Dressed in ceremonial robes, surrounded by spiritual objects, it turned out she was a delicate 12 to 15-year-old girl who archaeologists began calling Juanita, the Ice Maiden. Since she was brought to the University of Arequipa, she has revealed a good deal about Inca customs and beliefs. Scientific tests revealed her diet had changed about a year before her death, as Inca tradition treated her as an elite member of society. She also was sedated before the sacrifice. She's now kept frozen and encased in glass here at the Museo Santuarios Andinos in Arequipa. Here's Juanita, the Ice Maiden, today. Travelers who think the U.S. Grand Canyon is deep are likely to change their minds after visiting the Colca Canyon, located about 100 miles away from Arequipa. At 10,700 feet deep, Colca Canyon is twice as deep as the Grand Canyon, although Colca Canyon's walls are less steep. It's a very impressive canyon. It's about 40 miles long. In addition to the awesome panoramic views you can get here, the Andean condors are another main attraction. Not too far away is the Cotahuasi Canyon. It is the deepest canyon in the world, but it's in a very remote location, so most visitors head to the more accessible Colca Canyon. Here's an Andean condor riding up on a thermal and some more Andean condors. Now we have a short video of the Colca Canyon. Next, we have the Titicaca edition. So now we'll zoom into southern Peru to see Lake Titicaca. It's about an hour and a half flight from Lima to the airport that serves the Titicaca region, Juliaca. Lake Titicaca is the highest navigable lake in the world at 12,750 feet above sea level. It is the center of the Altiplano, the name of the harsh highland region better suited for roaming vicuñas and alpacas than for people. Here, thousands of subsistence farmers make a living on fishing in the lake's icy waters, growing potatoes in the rocky highlands at Titicaca's edge, or herding llama and alpaca at altitudes that only leave North Americans and European tourists gasping for oxygen. Here, the indigenous population has resisted 5 centuries of Spanish campaigns to reach the Inca and pre-Inca cultures and more recent attempts at modernizing their lifestyle. From these turquoise waters sprung Viracocha, the Inca creator god, to create the world for the Inca Empire. Today we see in the Titicaca region things that are found nowhere else. People living on floating islands made of reeds, lifestyles where women wear bowler caps and the men do the knitting on their own woolen caps. Juliaca is your transportation hub for this area with a railway station, a bus terminal, and the Manco Capac International Airport. From Juliaca, ground transport to Puno is about 25 miles and it takes about 45 minutes. Puno was founded in 1668, the capital of the Altiplano. During the Spanish colonial period, it was one of the richest cities in Peru due to the local silver mines. Today, it has a population of around 150,000. It has a cold mountain climate. Nighttime temperatures drop below freezing, whether it's winter or summer. The Altiplano is Peru's folkloric center. There's a wide array of handicrafts, fiestas, and more than 300 different ethnic dances here. Altiplano people are accustomed to hard work, but they also like to celebrate hard. The Puno Cathedral is officially named La Catedral Basílica San Carlos Borromeo. The Andean Baroque style cathedral was built in 1757. Just uphill from the Plaza de Armas is a park topped by a statue of Manco Capac, the first Inca. From here is an excellent panoramic view of Puno and the lake. Even further up, you can climb 620 more steps to the Mirador de Cuntu Huasi, or Condor Hill. In Parque Pino is the French Gothic Church of St. John the Baptist, where the festival of the Virgen de Candelaria begins each year in January and February. Puno's Peak Cultural Festival, also known as Mamacha Candelaria, as it is associated with the Earth Mother or Pachamama, and that symbolizes purity and fertility. The city market in Puno is a colorful collection of handicrafts, woolen items, and food. You'll be amazed at the wide variety of potatoes, including freeze-dried chuño, purple and yellow potatoes, and the orange speckled oyuco fibers. Among other souvenirs you'll find here are the equeco. This is a small statue of an Andean man with a mustache wearing traditional Andean clothes. And he has a cap, like a cap and a poncho, and then he's loaded down with bags and baskets, household objects, currency bills, and he's smoking a cigarette. The Akeko carries anything a person needs for a comfortable and prosperous life. He is put in a place of honor in the home with an offering made to Akekos, who then are believed to bring health and wealth to every member of the home. Another tradition is that Akekos only bring good luck in the home when they are received as gifts, not purchased for oneself. You will also find in Puno's market these ceramics called toritos de pucará. These have been used for centuries by indigenous Peruvians for protection and now are part of the indigenous Andean identity. It was during a long drought centuries ago when a poor indigenous farmer took his small bull up a mountain to make an offering to the Inca gods of weather so that his crops could grow. The bull apparently thought it was about to be sacrificed to the gods because while moving its head back and forth to resist, his horn struck a rock. Suddenly, water gushed out from the rock and it sprayed and sprayed enough for the entire region's crops to grow. Everybody proclaimed it was a miracle. So ever since then, Peruvians have placed these little bulls at the highest peak of their house for good fortune and fertility. The Yavari steamship is now a floating museum. In 1861, the Peruvian Navy ordered two gunboats from England to patrol the lake. These ships were put together at the Thames Ironworks in England, then shipped knocked down. So it was like IKEA furniture, basically. The two boats arrived a year later in Peru in a total of 2,766 pieces. Since there was no railway from the coast of the Andes, the parts of the two gunboats, all 210 tons of it, were carried by mule all the way up to Lake Titicaca. Since many of the parts got lost, it took 8 years to put the Yavari back together. Over the years, its original cow dung-fired engine was upgraded to a diesel engine. It continued in service until 1975, then was restored in 1982 as a floating museum. The best-known islands of Titicaca are the Islas de los Uros, which are artificial floating islands of reed. Legends describe the Uros Islanders as people who are like the fish and birds of the water because they are incapable of drowning. They are apparently developed their unique way of life to resist the conquering Incas. As you step off the boat under the Uros Reed Islands, it is a peculiar spongy feeling. With each step, your shoes sink in a couple of inches. It's kind of like walking on a bed. The Uros on their 25 floating islands live off the lake, hunting birds, fishing for trout, and eating lake animals. The lake reeds are used to make their houses and boats and the islands themselves. The lower layers of the reeds decay in the water, and then they are replaced from the top with new layers of reeds. The soft roots of the reeds are eaten, so it is a very well-used plant. The Uros Islanders will first give you a presentation on how they build their homes, then other islanders will show you their houses and try to get you to buy their very nice embroideries. After that, they may ask you to go on a boat ride on a reed boat for about 10 soles or $3. Here's a video of the Uros Islands. There's some Spanish subtitles in this. You don't really have to worry about them. From the Uros, it's about a 2-hour boat ride to the Isla Tequila. This is a solid island with skilled weavers and a market where visitors can buy well-made woolen goods. The designs carry hidden messages about the wearer's social standing or marital status. Here, two men are knitting the popular wooden chuyo caps. The Taquile Island residents control their own tourism operations so that outsiders do not destroy their traditions. There are no hotels in Taquile, but the islanders here do open their homes to tourists interested in an overnight stay. Arrangement for overnights can be made at the boat dock on the island. There are several places to eat with tasty fish and rice dishes. The Isla Amantani is a peaceful island even farther away from Puno than Taquile. The two peaks here are Pachatata, the Earth Father, and Pachamama, the Earth Mother. The hillsides are terraced, worked by hand, and planted with quinoa, potatoes, and other vegetables. Most Amantani residents live on the island and die without leaving the island. There are no hotels in Amantani, but some of the 800 families here do open their homes to tourists for overnight stays and cooked meals. This is arranged by the tour companies who have a system that families must follow, including having a special room set aside for the tourists. Guests typically take food staples like cooking oil, rice, and fruits as a gift or school supplies for the children on the island, but no sweets for the kids, please. Just be advised there's no running water here and nighttime temperatures do drop below freezing. The women offer self-made alpaca hats to their visitors as cover during the night, which visitors are welcome to buy at the end of their stay. If you would like to immerse yourself in their culture, staying overnight is a great way to do it. Now, the biggest event in Puno is the Virgen de Candelaria feast, held the end of January and beginning of February. The feast honors Puno's patron saint, the Virgen de Candelaria, whose feast day is Candlemas, February 2nd, a day that is midway between the solstice and equinox. Churches back in Spain blessed and handed out candles for the parishes for the rest of the dark days of the winter. Hence, the feast day is Candlemas in English and Candelaria in Spanish. Now, the Germans, you may know, celebrated Candlemas Day also, believing that if the sun came out on this midpoint of winter, then there would be a second winter of 6 more weeks. And if it was cloudy on Candlemas, it would be an early spring. The Germans checked the shadow of a local animal, the hedgehog, to see if there was a shadow. And then when German settlers later brought this custom to North America, well, that's when you know Bill Murray changed the animal to a groundhog. Now, the most famous dance in Puno is the Diablada, the devil dance, where dancers compete fiercely to outdo each other with their grotesque masks in order to scare away the devil. The origins of the dance go back to pre-Inca cultures. The women wear multicolored polleras, or layered skirts. Many of the dances incorporate features from more repressive times, with dancers in costumes representing mine overseers or landowners who are mocked and made fun of during the dances. Next will be a video of the Virgen de Candelaria Festival in Puno. And here's some things to look for. The announcement as the sun sets on Lake Titicaca. The local officials bless the Earth Mother with beverages. Fireworks are set off. The street dancers and bands appear. And then the stadium also has a dance competition. And then watch for the crowd along the street during the wave and spring foam like at Carnival.
¡Viva la fiesta de la Candelaria! ¡Viva los cholitos andinos! ¡Viva la gran llamerada! ¡Vamos!
to Cusco. We focus again on southern Peru, but north of the Titicaca region. It's about an hour flight from Lima to Cusco. As you take off from Lima, if it's wintertime, you'll see the cloudy fog banks obscuring the city and the foothills of the Andes. You'll fly up and over the Andes Mountains. Some of the peaks you see will be over 20,000 feet high. Then you finally land in Cusco. After you get off the plane, you may be feeling the effects of the 11,000-foot altitude. Remember, you've gone up from sea level up to 11,000 feet in about an hour. So if you have any sealed flexible containers like bags or plastic bottles, shampoo or water, there's sea level air inside pressing out. So now they're all puffed up like a balloon. That's what is also happening into your lungs, your heart, and your brain. So you may be feeling some altitude sickness. In Peru, it's called soroche. This feels somewhat like a bad hangover. Hopefully your hotel has provided you some mate de coca to calm your stomach and headache. It's recommended you rest a few hours before getting very active and take it easy climbing steps. Now, if you're wondering, I have a box of mate de coca here that I brought back many, many years ago. I don't really recommend that you bring some of this back. It could be, uh, it could require you to make some quick explanations when you get to the U.S. border. Here in Cusco, the past is revealed every single day. Indigenous vendors speak Spanish to tourists and then turn around to each other and speak Quechua. Catholic nuns live in buildings now once occupied by the Inca chosen women. Here, the Last Supper is depicted in a painting with Jesus and the apostles eating hot peppers and roasted guinea pig. Trains and airplanes now link Cusco, where earlier only chasqui runners connected the empire of the Incas. The city is now often spelled Cusco to come closer to the Quechua name, the navel of the world. The first Incas, Manco Capac and Mama Ocllo, built their city in the shape of a puma, the big cat that is a predator in the Andes. They pointed the puma to the northwest. For centuries thereafter, their descendants farmed and the valley became prosperous. Emperor Pachacutec led the expansion of the empire in the late 1400s, and throughout the Inca Empire, there was little or no poverty or hunger. Cusco has one of the most unique characteristic architectures in the world. The huge walls of closely fitting stones built over 500 years ago by the Incas was topped by Spanish attempts to eradicate any traces of the Inca civilization. The Spaniards tore down as much of the Inca structures as they could. Then they just planted their own Spanish buildings on top of the Inca buildings. When in 1650 a massive earthquake struck Cusco, the Spanish colonial walls were destroyed and the Inca walls and buildings survived. The Plaza de Armas has always been the heart and soul of Cusco, even in Inca times. So your tour starts here. Cusco is the oldest continuously occupied city of South America since around 1100 CE. The plaza was also the center plaza called Huaycapata in the Inca Empire of the Tahuantinsuyo, the four quarters of the earth. But the Inca Plaza was twice as large as the current Spanish Plaza is today. The Inca Huaycapata was linked to all palaces of the previous emperors, and it was surfaced with white sand, tiny shells, and bits of gold. Today, with plenty of benches and a fountain, the Plaza de Armas is lined with restaurants and shops as vendors in the arcades and streets call out to you, "Comprame, comprame," buy from me. If you want a velvet painting of Machu Picchu, well, this is the guy to see right here. Some more photos around the Plaza de Armas of Cusco. There are actually four Spanish churches on the plaza: the cathedral, the Jesus Maria el Triunfo, and the Church of La Compañía de Jesus. The Spaniards were really attempting to erase the pagan religion of the Incas. The cathedral was built on top of the remains of the Palace of Viracocha and has an Inca stone base and Spanish Baroque architecture above. It took over 100 years to build the cathedral, which was completed in 1654. Next to the cathedral sacristy is the painting of the Last Supper in Andean motif by Marcos Zapata, who painted this in 1753. Note the roasted cuy on the platter on the table. Here's a shot inside the cathedral, a view of the main altar, which is in solid silver. Next to the altar is the venerated statue known as Nuestro Señor de los Temblores, our Lord of the Earthquakes. The statue was paraded around the streets of Cusco during the 1650 earthquake, and it was believed to have stopped the tremors. The cathedral's bell in the North Tower can be heard from 25 miles away. Weighing over a ton, the 300-year-old bell is the largest in South America. It had a twin at one time, which was dropped by workers at the edge of Lake Titicaca, where the bells were being made. So Cusqueños now say this bell peals out every day for its lost partner at the bottom of the lake. Cusco is an amazing city with a diverse people from all backgrounds, nationalities, religions, interests, all gathering together to share and learn about new cultures and to learn about each other. You might have noticed the flag of Peru and another flag in Cusco's Plaza de Armas. You'll also see the same flag here at Cusco's city government building. That's because the rainbow flag is the official city flag of Cusco and has been for many years. Since the time of the Incas, the rainbow has had a special place in people's culture. There was a god of the rainbow, and the Arco de Iris, the rainbow in Spanish, was always considered to be a sign of good fortune. Even today, when an Andean child draws a picture of his or her own home, the child is likely to place a rainbow above it for good luck. El Triunfo Church is next door to the cathedral. It means victory. El Triunfo honors the Spanish victory in 1536 when Cusco was under siege for months by Manco Inca, where the Spaniards had made their puppet emperor. The last of the churches on the plaza is Compañía de Jesus, one of the most beautiful ones in Cusco. It is located where the palace of Inca Huayna Capac once stood. The Jesuit church, with a Baroque exterior and intricate interior with carved balconies and gold leaf covered altars, was started in 1571 and took a century to complete. The Temple of Coricancha was the most important place of worship for the Incas. This was the Temple of the Sun. It is now the church and monastery of Santo Domingo, or St. Dominic. The Spanish chroniclers reported the walls here were covered in at least 700 sheets of gold, studded with emeralds and turquoise, with windows positioned for the sun to reflect off the precious metal wall paneling. The Spanish chronicles tell the European astonishment at seeing Coricancha filled with gold and silver items. A huge gold disc representing the sun covered one full wall. Another disc of silver was on the opposite wall. In Coricancha, the Spaniards found full-size statues in gold of llamas, trees, flowers, corn stalks, and more. According to the legend, Atahualpa's ransom included 20 of the life-size golden statues of beautiful women removed from Coricancha and taken to Cajamarca in the Incas' attempt to free Atahualpa. There have been ongoing excavations and restoration of the Coricancha temple inside Santo Domingo Church for many, many years. There were also chapels with lesser gods in Coricancha of the moon, stars, thunder, and the rainbow. This is what the Temple of the Sun, Coricancha, probably looked like at the time of the Incas. This subterranean museum today along Avenida del Sol is actually underneath the Coricancha Temple of the Sun on the hill above it. There are just 3 small rooms here displaying Inca and pre-Inca ceramics, metalwork, and textile weavings. Most interesting are the photos of the excavation of Coricancha. The severe earthquake in 1950 opened up new areas for excavation. You don't need a lot of time here, but it's really worth stopping in. Iglesia La Merced, just past the Plaza de Armas, this is one of Cusco's most important churches. It was completely destroyed in the 1650 earthquake, but the church took only 4 years to rebuild. It contains the remains of Francisco Pizarro's brother Gonzalo and those of Pizarro's partner in the conquest of Peru, Diego de Almagro. Almagro was executed here after his failed overthrow of Pizarro as governor of Peru. These are the colonnades of the convent of La Merced. One of La Merced's most prized possessions is a very ostentatious, jewel-studded, solid gold monstrance. This is the tabernacle that holds the sanctified body of Jesus. It is almost 4 feet high, weighs 44 pounds, and is covered with rubies, emeralds, over 1,500 diamonds, and 600 pearls. Here's a view of the cloisters at La Merced. Now, along a street in Cusco, this is the 12-angled stone, a tribute to the Inca stonemasons. Seemingly, it was left to prove that there's no piece of granite too difficult to shape to be fitted tightly into a wall. Here you can see the 12 angles of the 12-angled stone. Some children on the street in Cusco. The Museum of Religious Art. This is a Moorish building with carved doors and balconies built on the side of the Inca Roca's palace. It used to be the Archbishop's palace in Cusco. This museum has an exhibition of religious artworks of the colonial era. It's a beautiful colonial mansion highlighted by its front, its courtyard, and its balconies. As we walk behind the cathedral and go up the hill toward the San Blas neighborhood, we may see people like this. And note that the steps in the street as they go uphill, since there were no wheels or vehicles in Inca times, the streets have steps so you can walk up. This is the Iglesia San Blas, the Church of San Blas. Has a very ornate altar and a carved wooden pulpit. Around the San Blas neighborhood, there's a waterfall in the plaza, a view of the snow-capped mountains across the homes, and the famous blue balconies and blue doors. Another photo of the blue balconies in San Blas, and still one more. The Coca Museum is in this part of Cusco, and it tells the story of ancient Peruvians and their centuries-old custom of chewing coca leaves to ward off hunger and build stamina. The arrival of the Spanish introduced coca to the rest of the world. Then in the 19th century, a German chemist developed a distillation process to extract its main alkaloid, which he named cocaine. That's what gave the plant its notoriety. And yes, they do sell coca pisco here in the gift shop. The Museo Inca is in the Admiral's House up the hill from the Plaza de Armas. This is the best museum in Cusco about the Incas. The restored interior is packed with metal and gold work, jewelry, pottery, textiles, mummies, models, and a large collection of drinking vessels. The museum building was badly damaged in the 1650 earthquake, then rebuilt. It was then further damaged in the 1950 earthquake, but has now been fully restored and is one of Cusco's finest colonial era buildings. And here we see artists and weavers in the central courtyard of the Admiral's House. This is the house of Inca Garcilaso. There's a museum in the 16th century house from the famous writer Inca Garcilaso de la Vega. He was the son of an Inca nobleman at the time of the conquest who moved to Spain and wrote about the history of the Incas. The museum exhibits contemporary art and paintings and metalwork from the colonial period. As you walk along the streets of Cusco, you will run across street musicians, and don't forget to attend a folkloric performance. Now, this is a must-see place in Cusco, preferably before you go to Machu Picchu. This newer museum exhibits 360 artifacts from Machu Picchu that were returned by Yale University of Peru in 2011. This commemorates the 100th anniversary of Hiram Bingham's expeditions in the early 20th century. Also returned to Peru from Yale in 2011 were more than 30,000 additional pieces of pottery, stonework, and other items that are now kept in storage to be studied by local and international researchers. It's located in the Casa Concha. The Machu Picchu Museum shows the array of handicrafts made by the Incas. There are also exhibits of Bingham's expedition and a scale model of the Machu Picchu archaeological site. The Centro de Textiles Tradicionales del Cusco is a nonprofit organization established in 1996 to support native weavers and Cusco textile traditions. The center works on a fair trade basis to promote the products of indigenous weavers. Woolen items sold here are excellent in quality, and they are priced accordingly. San Pedro Market is a good place for souvenir shopping. There's enough here to entertain you all afternoon. But by now, you're probably getting hungry and you want to have some dinner. So it's now time to try some roasted cuy, just like every other tourist in Cusco. Some restaurants will offer a fillet slice of meat, but locals prefer to see the whole roasted animal. It tastes something like chicken and rabbit. So with that, we are ready to go on the area surrounding Cusco, the sacred valley of the Incas. So now we're ready to visit the sacred valley of the Incas. So what exactly are we talking about when we say Sacred Valley of the Incas? The Sacred Valley, El Valle Sagrado de los Incas, is the valley of the Urubamba River that runs northwesterly from near Cusco to Machu Picchu. It's a fertile valley where the Quechua people still live their lives the same way they have for over 5 centuries. These are some of the points of interest that we will see in this virtual tour of the Sacred Valley. The Incas believe the northwest-aligned Sacred Valley is reflected in the nighttime skies in the Wilcumayu, the river of stars that floats above, we call it the Milky Way. When the Urubamba River is not visible at night, the river of stars flows above the earth in one continuous northwest path. For this reason, Cusco was also laid out pointing to the northwest, just as the Incas' creator god Viracocha traveled to the northwest before crossing the ocean. The Sacred Valley is where you have a chance at a real cross-cultural exchange. You've seen these folks in your walks around Cusco, but now you'll get to immerse yourself in their culture that has lasted for centuries. And you will see them in their own element, up close and personal. You will see pre-Inca ruins, buy souvenirs at artisan markets, you'll eat local food, and you'll learn about life in the Andes. Most of the places we visit in this virtual tour are day trips from Cusco. Touring the Sacred Valley is the best prelude you have to your trip to Machu Picchu. This is Sacsayhuaman. It's the Inca fortress that overlooks Cusco. You actually can walk up here from Cusco's Plaza de Armas if you like, but you should save your leather and go on a tour that brings you up here by bus. Sacsayhuaman is an overwhelming fortress. It's made of massive stone, some over 125 tons, and it was built to defend Cusco. It has a double wall zigzag shape which forms the mouth and teeth of the puma shape that outlines Cusco. The massive fort was constructed by orders from Inca Pachacutec. Some 30,000 Inca laborers worked on this gigantic construction project for at least 70 years. They hauled immense stone blocks up the mountain to build the fortress. Apparently, they used ramps and inclines to do this, perhaps with logs they used to roll the stones. Then they placed the stones so tightly together without mortar that a knife blade cannot even be placed in between them. Yet they had no iron or steel to cut the stones into required shapes. The Sacsayhuaman fortress was the focal point for the 1536 rebellion of Manco Inca. He tried to expel the Spanish and return Cusco and the rest of the empire to the Incas. Manco's troops fought bravely, but the Spanish soldiers took control of Sacsayhuaman and of Cusco. Here you can still see the Inca's throne, where the Sapa Inca reviewed his passing troops. Sacsayhuaman is a great place to take photos with images contrasting the sizes of the gigantic stones and the tourists and the ancient stones. Also contrast with the brilliant white statue of Christ with arms outstretched overlooking the area around Cusco. Other photo ops are the Quechua people in their traditional dress showing off their llamas or asking you to take their photo for a tip. This is the view of Cusco from up at Sacsayhuaman. Your tour guide will probably tell you if you have difficulty saying the Quechua word Sacsayhuaman, you should just say sexy woman to remember it. The Inca Festival of the Sun, known as Inti Raymi, is held on June 24th to celebrate the winter solstice. It had not been observed for centuries when it was revived in Cusco in the 1940s. Thousands of people in the Cusco area and tourists from around the world all follow the Inca's procession from the Coricancha to the Plaza de Armas and then up to the fortress of Sacsayhuaman. The Inca, for a day in full regal splendor, is carried on a litter. The fires of the empire are lit, and a llama is made believed to be sacrificed to the sun god Inti. Music and dance groups begin, all of them dressed in Inca costumes. The ceremony lasts for hours. But for all the days around Inti Raymi, the city is full of color and energy with centuries-old traditions. Now here's a short video of Inti Raymi. About 4 miles from Sacsayhuaman is Kenko, an Inca shrine with an 18-foot block of stone that is said to represent a puma. Kenko was carved in place from the limestone found here. Farther up the road is a smaller Pucapucará fortress that guarded the Inca road into Cusco. Further north, this is the Tambo Machai. They are sacred baths for the Inca rulers and the chosen women. The Inca-designed aqueduct still feeds crystalline water into a series of fountains. Here, Inca Pachacutec received the prophecy that the Incas were destined to be the conquerors of other lands. Along the way, you see people like this along the road. Chinchero is a town known as the town of the rainbow in Inca times. Now is a popular 3-day-a-week market. They said Chinchero is one of Inca Tupac Yupanqui's favorite spots. Now people in the area use the market for socializing as much as they do for trading their goods. The Chinchero market is especially known for its woven goods. Tupac Yupanqui probably enjoyed the views of these snow-capped mountains and the river below. Here's a street scene from Chinchero, and Chinchero at dusk, and another one right after the sun went down. It's really a must-see place in the Sacred Valley, Chinchero. In February 2017, the Peruvian president, Pedro Kuczynski, laid foundation for a new airport here at Chinchero. It would replace the Cuzco airport and increase tourists to allow 6 million per year to arrive. No, President Kuczynski resigned in 2018 due to corruption scandals, and then the pandemic in 2020 this year has slowed construction. It had been planned to be ready in 2021, but no one's really expecting that. Pisac on the river with its fortress above the town. Pisac was a royal retreat with ritual baths and precisely fitted stones. And here we see on the right a cana player in the mountains. Like Cusco's in the shape of a puma, Pisac's mountain ruins and its terraces are said to be in the shape of a condor. The condor was considered the protector bird by the Incas. Like the puma, the condor is one of the nighttime constellations seen by the Incas. Pisac is well known for its 3-day-a-week market. It's held on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays. If you want, you can also spend the night in Pisac. The market on Sundays has a party atmosphere, maybe because of the popular beer tent. There's music from a band also that adds to the festivities. The later in the day and the longer the beer tent is open, the more chance you may have to be able to get a better bargain. This little guy was taking a siesta while mom does her shopping. There are many colorful photo ops at this market. It's less touristy during the week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. At the potato park outside of Pisac, visitors learn about the indigenous cultivation methods right in the fields where the potatoes themselves are grown. The potato park shows native potatoes at different altitudes to create genetically hardier plants adaptable to different environments. The park guides explain how the use of a single variety of potato in Ireland led to famine during the mid-19th century. Traveling now about 25 miles up the road from Pisac, we get to Urubamba. This is the largest town in the Sacred Valley. It's a favorite place now for travelers to stay, with hotels in all price ranges. Also, it's a good jumping off point for the salt pans at Maras and the agricultural terraces of Morai. So we continue around the Sacred Valley. You see the condor flying, snow-capped peaks in the distance of the valley, 2 farmers here, and a traditional weaver. Morai appears to be a place where different varieties of corn were developed to grow at different altitudes. In the Maras salt pan, salty water rises from a spring, then through canals to the pans. After evaporation, the salt then is scooped out of each pan and used to preserve food. Continuing up the Sacred Valley, you come to the large fortress of Ollantaytambo. It's named after Ollantay, the great general who carried out Pachacutec's conquest to expand the Inca Empire. The fortress has 7 rose-colored granite monoliths that are a puzzle to scientists because this stone is not quarried anywhere in the Sacred Valley. Ollantaytambo is strategically placed at the north end of the Sacred Valley. The fortress was not finished before the Spanish conquest. In the 1536 Inca uprising, 100 Spaniards, led by Hernando Pizarro, were searching for Manco Inca, who was hiding up here. The Spaniards looked up in the first light of day and saw hundreds of Inca soldiers peering down on them. Manco Inca was astride a Spanish horse directing his troops. Manco had his soldiers divert the nearby river through irrigation channels, then flooded the plain the Spaniards were crossing on their horses. The Spaniards barely escaped drowning, but were forced to retreat to Cusco. But the Spaniards later returned with reinforcements, and Manco Inca had to escape to Vilcabamba, where later he was captured and killed. Here you can see the terraces, mountains, and buildings that seem to form a mother llama and a baby llama. Here's another drawing that helps you better see the shape of the mother and baby. And of course, these are constellations in the Inca sky. The sun comes directly over the crook in the mountain on the winter solstice, and that makes the eye of the llama figure on the mountain light up. Light enters through the door of a building, striking the wall and lighting it up, as you can see here. Now, this is after a rough day at the ruins. The village of Ollantaytambo is one of the best preserved Inca settlements, with old walls still standing and water still running through the century-old streets. People here live and work much the same as they have since before the Spanish conquest. Here's some more scenes along the road in the Sacred Valley. Choqquequirao is a breathtaking set of ruins, but being in a remote spot and still needing much clearing out, it is not visited very much. It requires a rough 4-day hike just to get here and back. It's architecturally similar to Machu Picchu because it has ruins in a low spot between two peaks. What's interesting is there are at least 25 figures like these in the terrace walls. These figures are about 4 feet high, and they look similar to Chachapoyas art in northern Peru, but that's over 1,000 miles away. So this is another one of those mysteries of Peru. The main attraction of Andahuaylillas, 25 miles south of Cusco, is its Baroque church of San Pedro. The church is nicknamed the Sistine Chapel of America because of the magnificent frescoes that adorn its wall and ceiling. In 2017, when snow melted and revealed Vinacunca, tourists started coming here. It's a 16,000-foot tall mountain about 65 miles south of Cusco. If you haven't seen photos of this mountain before coming to Peru, you certainly will see the photos once you get to Cusco. The mountain's unique environmental conditions over time created a marbling effect with hues of gold, lavender, red, and turquoise. It's known by all these names: Vinicunca, Montaña de los Siete Colores, the Mountain of Seven Colors, and Rainbow Mountain. This tour is only for the true adventure seekers who are fully acclimated to the altitude. Hikers leave Cusco about 3 to 4 a.m. for the tour that returns in the evening. The bus from Cusco takes about 3 hours to get there and then drops you off about 5 miles below the peak. You can walk or rent a horse for the rest of the 5 miles uphill from there, which can take you another 3 to 4 hours, but your mileage may vary. At over 16,000 feet, you will feel the effects of the altitude. Plus, there can be any combination of ice, rain, fog, or snow. When you finally get up to the top, all you may get to see is this, or you may possibly see this. So some hikers may be underwhelmed at the sight because if it happens to be a cloudy day, the colors can be rather muted and dull. So you just take this for what it's worth. Now, as we move on, we leave the sacred valley of the Incas and we prepare to get to the main event, namely Machu Picchu. So now we're ready for the main event, the sanctuary of Machu Picchu. But first, travel is not just about the destination, it's also about the journey. What you do while getting to your destination, that's also very important. So where have we journeyed to get to the door of Machu Picchu? Well, first we came to Lima. We experienced the Spanish colonial balconies, the churches, the pre-Inca ruins, one of the cradles of civilization, the mummies and museums, the parks, the magic waters, the sunset over the Pacific. We ate ceviche, anticuchos, and we drank pisco sours. We watched the marinera, and we met the Peruvian people. Then we came to Cusco. We saw a culture unchanged for half a millennium. We learned about the Incas, the gold altars, the colonial art. We ate the roasted cuy. We learned about the conquest of Peru, the Andean Last Supper, the folkloric show. We drank Cusqueña beer. Then we traveled to the Sacred Valley, to marketplaces, fortresses. We were side by side with the Quechua people. We saw flying condors, the potatoes, the tightly fitted 100-ton stones that have been there for centuries, the weavers, the mountains, the snow caps. So now we're ready to visit Machu Picchu, one of the new 7 wonders of the world. And I maintain that it would be an extreme challenge for any of us to find such a diverse and extraordinary journey as we've had in Peru with any of the other of these 7 wonders destinations. So now some background. It's been only about 100 years that Machu Picchu has been known to the world at large. During that time, it has become practically synonymous with Peru. Machu Picchu, located about 50 miles northwest of Cusco at almost 8,000 feet, it's lower than Cusco. It's perched above the Urubamba River in a narrow saddle between 2 sharp peaks. Machu Picchu means the old peak, and Huayna Picchu means the new peak. It was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1983. The site escaped detection by the Spaniards and was unknown to the outside world for 300 years. It may have been visited by German adventurer Augusto Burns in 1867 and some others, but it was neither publicized nor studied in any kind of scientific way. Machu Picchu was uncovered and made known to the rest of the world in 1911 by Yale history professor Hiram Bingham. Born in Hawaii in 1875, he was the grandson of one of the first Christian missionaries in Hawaii and attended what is now Puna House School in Honolulu, a very exclusive school where Barack Obama also attended. Later in life, he was elected governor and senator of Connecticut. Bingham married the granddaughter of Charles Tiffany, and they had 7 sons. He graduated from Yale and received his PhD from Harvard in Latin American history in 1905. In 1907, he was hired by Princeton University president Woodrow Wilson as a Latin American history lecturer at the college. In 2008, Bingham attended the Pan American Scientific Conference in Santiago, Chile, and as a return trip was invited to see ruins in southern Peru, such as Choquequirao. He published a book about this trip called Across South America. Bingham was not a trained archaeologist, but in 1911 he organized the Yale Peruvian expedition to search for the lost city of the Incas. Among the ruins he located was Espiritu Pampa, which years later was verified to be Vilcabamba, the last refuge of Manco Inca. But Bingham was not aware of this, so he continued his search. Bingham was led to the site by a local resident, Melchor Arteaga, who took Bingham to a farmer living on the top of the mountain. His 11-year-old son was delegated to show Hiram Bingham Machu Picchu. Bingham believed here he found Vilcabamba, where Manco Inca and his successors continued to rebel against Spanish rule until 1572. Other explorers since the conquest may have been to Machu Picchu, but Bingham was the first to bring Machu Picchu to worldwide attention. Bingham later returned 3 more times, sponsored by Yale and the National Geographic Society. Bingham also introduced the idea that ancient ruins were not for looting of their precious metal treasures, as vaqueros had been doing for years, but rather to collect antiquities for study and research to contribute to the overall global knowledge of history and archaeology. This mode of thinking changed the entire science of archaeology. Inside the tangled vegetation of the mountain his young guide led him through, Bingham spotted stone-faced terraces, much like he'd seen at Ollantaytambo. But then something caught Bingham's attention in the green maze of trees, some beautiful granite stone buildings. Hidden in bamboo and thatch, these were perhaps hundreds of perfectly fitted stone-built houses. Bingham almost fell into a cave the boy showed him. It had 4 white stone steps that cast mysterious shadows. Directly above the cave was a semicircular tower that formed a letter P with 2 small windows. Bingham quickly began naming everything he saw. The cave he named the Royal Mausoleum, and the tower was the semicircular temple, later to be called the Temple of the Sun. Bingham spotted another temple to the right. Best windows I've ever seen, he wrote down in his notebook. 3 windows, in fact, each 4 feet by 3 feet, facing east over the canyon to the rising sun. The windows overlooked a large central plaza, and in the distance, the soaring mountain peaks. Bingham was perplexed. He must have thought, wow, 3 large windows for no apparent purpose. These must be something significant. Bingham was digesting all this when his young tour guide took him to the site's highest point, where a large rock stood. It was specially carved like an odd-looking sundial. The top was 40 inches square in the form of a cut-off obelisk. From British explorer Clement Markham's writings in the Incas of Peru, Bingham knew this was an Intihuatana. He stationed his Peruvian Sergeant Carrasco and his boy guide next to it and snapped their photograph. The sun was setting, so they returned to the farmer's hut and descended down to the Urubamba River. The first guided tour of Machu Picchu took about 5 hours. There are 2 options to get to Machu Picchu, by train or by walking. There's no road that goes all the way there except the railroad. If you're in relatively good physical shape, enjoy hiking or trekking, that's what they call hiking these days, and if you enjoy tent camping and nature, then this is a good option for you. The Camino Inca, as it's called, the Inca Trail, is probably the #1 most spectacular trek in the entire world. You will go over mountain passes at over 13,000 feet in elevation and really get intimate with the land of the Incas. You will see some ruins and will have photo opportunities not available to the railroad traveler. You will carry your personal items in a backpack with you, and quechua porters will carry the tents, food, and the other items. You'll need to book your Camino Inca trek at least 6 months in advance. Permits run out fast during the high season, June, July, and August. Now, I've never hiked the Inca Trail. I don't really plan to, but all four of my sobrinos, my nephews and nieces, have done this and said it was the best experience of their lives. And this was after we had taken them to Disney World multiple times. They all did the Camino Inca, though, while they were in their early 20s and before they got married and before kids. There are several options for the Inca Trail. All end up at the Sun Gate, the Inti Punku. The 2-day, this is an Inca Trail light. There's no camping, only does the last stage of the trail. You hike up to Winya Inca ruins. With all due apologies to Rod Stewart, this translates as forever young. Then you overnight at Agua Calientes at the base of Machu Picchu and visit the citadel the following day and take a train back to Cuzco. The 7-day Salcantay trek. This is the most challenging trek option. You pass by the impressive 20,500 foot high Salcantay mountain, which is taller than any mountain in North America. The most popular Inca Trail route will take you between 4 and 5 days to get to Machu Picchu. This is what most people talk about when they talk about the Inca Trail. The highest point on these trails is the Warma Wanuska Pass, which means Dead Woman's Pass. It's almost 14,000 feet high. Both the 4-day and 5-day treks cover the same trail. The 5-day just goes a little slower to see more, maybe take more photos, and it could be better for the less fit hikers. Like other Inca treks on the morning of the last day, you enter Machu Picchu from the Inti Punku, the Sun Gate, at dawn to see Machu Picchu in all of its splendor. Here you see the Inti Punku Sun Gate Trail that's going up on the right side here. The sunrise over Machu Picchu can be seen from here and only from here. On the travelers taking the Inca Trail of Machu Picchu will enter the ruins through the Inti Punku first thing in the morning, usually around sunrise. Remember that Machu Picchu is in the cloud forest, so many days of the year it could be cloudy. So sometimes you won't be able to see the sunrise at Machu Picchu from here. And then if it's even slightly clear, this is the horde of photographers trying to get the shot at sunrise. So you might get to see something like this, or perhaps this at sunrise. But even if you don't get any decent images at sunrise, no worries. You can still take a hike back up here and take some pictures later from Machu Picchu. Now, if you're fortunate later in the day, you might get something like this in the afternoon from Inti Punku, the Sun Gate. So the second option to get to Machu Picchu, other than walking, is taking the train. This is by far the easiest and fastest option. Trains depart multiple times each day, year-round from Cusco. The train ride to Machu Picchu is one of the most beautiful train rides in the world. Your trains will roughly take 3.5 hours from Cusco. Be sure you do book your train tickets well in advance from Cusco to Machu Picchu. It is possible to visit Machu Picchu on a day trip by leaving Cusco around 7 a.m. on the train and returning to Cusco around 7:30 to 8 p.m. However, it's highly recommended that you allow enough time in your trip to stay overnight at Machu Picchu. Then you get to see Machu Picchu both in the afternoon and in the next morning. This will require a separate admission ticket for each day. So the train options. Number one is the Vista Dome. This is the most popular for most tourists. It's run by PERU Rail and it has wonderful panoramic windows. This option also offers food and non-alcoholic beverages served on board, all included in the price. Prepare for some breathtaking landscape and unforgettable panoramas. It may remind you somewhat of the scenery in The Lord of the Rings. Machu Picchu is hidden in a cloud forest. So you ascend out of the Cusco Valley, then through the mountains to the Urubamba Valley, and you see the landscape change considerably on your way further down into the tropical rainforest. On this train, there is also a little music, some dancers, and a fashion show for entertainment. The second option is the expedition train. It's also operated by PERU Rail, but is less expensive. It's more of a regular standard train, no big windows and no entertainments. So on this, you'll find both locals and tourists. Number three is the Hiram Bingham. The Belmont Company has a special luxury train to Machu Picchu. Belmont is the company that operates the Orient Express trains from London to Venice. Passengers get a welcome cocktail, a gourmet lunch, and have a spectacular observation car for their journey. This makes what is everyone's experience of a lifetime even better. This train obviously is the most pricey option. Then there's Inca Rail 3 times a day during the high season, April through October. This train offers different ticket options: economy, business, first class, and presidential. This is the least costly option of all, although the trains are not as spacious on Inca Rail as they are on the trains of Peru Rail. So we come over the Sacred Valley. So from the Sacred Valley, we come over the mountains, and you're now in a different world. It's a cloud forest and the high jungle at around 8,000 feet. If you're planning to stay overnight at Machu Picchu, there is only one hotel near the entrance. That's the first class Belmont Sanctuary Lodge. Rates are rather expensive, but this is a one-of-a-kind hotel in the world at a one-of-a-kind location. It's operated by this hotel chain, the Belmont, which also operates the Hiram Bingham train from Cusco and has several other hotels in Peru, as well as Europe, Asia, and the USA. Note that most rooms don't actually have views of Machu Picchu. Everyone else who is a little bit less exalted, who's staying overnight, will be in Aguas Calientes. This is the little town that lies in the valley alongside the river, about 1,300 feet below Machu Picchu. Rooms here come in all price ranges, but are more expensive than in the rest of Peru. Aguas Calientes, sometimes called Machu Picchu Pueblo, reminds me of Earl Bronson Highway, Route 192 in Kissimmee. To me, it's really overly Disney-fied. It's a tourist town that is a virtual island. It's bordered by towering cloud forests and 2 rushing rivers. You can only get there by foot or by train. But despite its gorgeous location, Aguas Calientes has the feel of a kind of a Wild West town with a large itinerant population. 2,500 tourists arrive today, another 2,500 arrive tomorrow, and the same will arrive the next day. The architecture has a lot of rebar and unfinished cement. Everything is crowded, full of tourists, and every inch seems to have a souvenir shop that pushes the hard sell. Since everything has to be brought in from the outside, restaurant prices can be higher too. Everyone gets off the train and nobody really knows where they are going. For the first-time visitor, it really is quite overwhelming. And 99%, of course, are first-time visitors. Your best bet is don't expect much in Aguas Calientes except to get a hot meal and a bed so you can get up early the next day and go to Machu Picchu. From Aguas Calientes, there's 2 options to make your way up to Machu Picchu. Option 1 is climb the 600 or so steps up the side of the mountain that takes at least 90 minutes. Or option 2, save your time and your legs and ride the bus. Buses from Aguas Calientes to Machu Picchu leave from 5:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. They take approximately 25 minutes to get up the side of the mountain. The buses are fully air conditioned and are very comfortable and leave whenever they are full. Of course, just like at Disney, you'll have to walk through a souvenir shop to get to the bus ticket booth. I don't know why they think tourists will want to take a bunch of souvenirs up to Machu Picchu. After boarding the bus, you will cross this bridge over the Urubamba River and see this sign for Machu Picchu. You are now on the Hiram Bingham Highway to Machu Picchu. The highway, 6 miles long up the mountainside, was dedicated in October 1948. The former explorer and former senator from Connecticut, Hiram Bingham, and his wife were both here at Machu Picchu for the dedication of his namesake highway. You're now in one of the most adventurous and exciting rides of your life. It's beyond any Busch Gardens roller coaster ride or Disney thrill ride. For the next 25 minutes, the bus driver will take you on the 6-mile-long Hiram Bingham Highway up the mountain. It's a zigzag, partly paved, partly gravel road. It has 14 hairpin turns. There are no guardrails. Since there are buses bringing tourists down on the same road, buses have to squeeze to the side or reverse direction sometimes to where the road is wide enough for 2 buses to pass. Sometimes the buses are going in opposite directions. They have to play a game of chicken on the road 1,000 feet above the bottom of the valley. But meanwhile, you'll be astounded by the wonderful views as the mountains spread out before you after each hairpin turn. In many places, the road is bordered by a drop many hundreds of feet down. And did I mention the road is unprotected by guardrails? The area is prone to heavy mist and can be dangerous in low visibility conditions. At some points of the serpentine road, passengers prone to vertigo should probably not look out the windows. It's not for the faint of heart. But when you arrive at the top, you can give a sigh of relief, for finally you have reached your bucket destination, Machu Picchu. Much of the ruins have been restored, and since it is a jungle, the vegetation must frequently be cut back so tourists have something to see. Machu Picchu, this is the way that it looks now. And this is the way it probably looked when used by the Incas with thatched roofs on the buildings. It's best to purchase your tickets and arrange your tour well in advance of your visit to Machu Picchu. You cannot enter Machu Picchu unless you are with a guided tour. Here's a map of Machu Picchu. Arriving from the Hiram Bingham Highway, you go past the hotel to the entrance and follow the signs or follow your tour guide. In this virtual tour, we will visit most of the indicated highlights on the map above. At first, if the weather is good and you're dying to get that iconic classic shot of Machu Picchu, go to what's called the guardhouse or Casa Guardian. It's labeled C on this map. This is the guardhouse. To get here, you'll be climbing steps to get up to the spot. If the weather is not good, then wait until later, as things can change quickly. If you do go up, you will be battling others with cameras, tourists reaching up and over others. So just understand, you may find something like this facing you when you're trying to get your photo. But if you're patient, try to keep a sense of humor, you might end up with a photo like this, the classic view of Machu Picchu. Behind the house of the Guardians is the funeral rock. Human remains have been found here, indicating it might be used for a funeral site. There's also some discussion that was used for sacrifices, human or animals. However, we do believe that Machu Picchu was a huge country estate for Sapa Inca Pachacutec, maybe somewhat like an Inca Camp David. And also it was a sacred ritual pilgrimage site. It could also have been an administrative center for the Inca Empire for this area along the Amazon jungle. Walking to Machu Picchu's entrance, you cannot miss the big staircase. This is the main stairway, and it follows the city wall with a dry moat in front of it. Inca history wasn't really pretty, and the citadel was also a fortress built for protective reasons. I also need to mention, before you actually enter the portal of Machu Picchu, you need to be aware there are no restrooms inside of the ruins. As you enter the city, the green thumb of Huayna Picchu is visible directly through the doorway. Note as you walk along the architecture and how stones have been set rather simply in contrast with royal houses you will see later in the tour. Water from Machu Picchu came from a pair of rain-fed springs about a mile away. The Incas directed water into a stone-like canal, and the canal passed under the city's outer wall through the agricultural area and into the residential zone. Then it flowed through a series of 16 fountains. Each fountain had a spout to direct water for filling clay water jugs. The fountains were linked by stone channels. They formed a 180-foot long cascade of water with a total vertical drop of 65 feet. Machu Picchu was never finished, and in this quarry you can clearly see uncut and partly cut stones. Why it was abandoned before it was finished remains a mystery. The main temple consists of huge walls that were perfectly set. The ground has settled at one corner here, causing some stones to move. Once sacred objects would have been placed along these walls, maybe golden figurines or maybe mummies. It remains unclear why the temple lacks the fourth wall. Some experts think it was intentional to make a better site for rituals, and others see it as proof that Machu Picchu was never finished. The Temple of the Three Windows, like the main temple, also has only 3 walls, and originally it may have had 5 windows. The 3 windows are thought to represent the 3 levels or realms of Inca religion. The Hanan Pacha, the heavens or spirituality of the world of above, represented by the condor. The Kaipacha, the earth or everyday physical life, represented by the puma. And the Uchu Pacha, the world of below or inner life, represented by the snake. The large monolith in front of the 3 windows also has 3 levels. The sacred rock was used for rituals, much like an altar. The Intihuatana is perhaps the most significant yet enigmatic sites in Machu Picchu. It is at the highest point in the ruins on a mound, sometimes referred to as a pyramid. It's not a stone that was put into place here. It's bedrock at the site, carved into somewhat of a sundial shape. The Intihuatana, called the hitching post of the sun, is part astronomical device and part religious altar. Many other Andean areas had similar Intihuatanas. The Spanish destroyed almost all of them, but this one, of course, they never found. The knob on the right points directly to the north. The Intihuatana stone is arranged to point directly at the sun during the winter solstice, June 21st. The Inca believed the stone held the sun in its place along its annual path in the sky, turning the sun around to move it north again as the days with more sunlight began. At midday on September 21st and March 21st, the equinoxes, the sun stands almost exactly above the pillar, casting no shadow. Heading down the path from the Intihuatana pyramid, you can't help but notice the flat expanse of picture-perfect lawn. This main plaza was probably used for important rituals like the open area at Sacsayhuaman. The main plaza divides Machu Picchu into different sectors. It's believed the high-ranking Incas took residence in the area close to the important temples directly in the vicinity of the Intihuatana and the Sacred Plaza. Crossing the main plaza, you come to two huts around a huge slab of natural rock. This is called the Sacred Rock, although whether it was actually a ritual site is not clear. The architecture resembles the main temple, but with cruder masonry. It does only have three walls facing a central stone. The shape of the sacred rock is similar to the mountains in the distance. It's located at the northernmost point in Machu Picchu. This area also has the trailhead for climbing Huayna Picchu, which was a revered mountain since it contained one of the higher spirits known as Apus. Following the path through Machu Picchu, your next stop is the industrial sector and its factory houses. Hiram Bingham thought these circular floor structures were mortars for use with the pestle stone to grind corn and chuño. Others have said these are clay jar holders in which to ferment chicha corn beer. Now it's believed these circular sculptures in the rock floor could be water mirrors for observing the sky. Behind the extensive industrial zone of Machu Picchu, you can find buildings overlook the abyss below. The central piece is a giant rock that looks a bit like a condor. The condor god Apokuntur was worshipped here and is still in the Andean region. The semicircular Temple of the Sun, also called El Torreon, has the most perfect stonework anywhere at Machu Picchu. It is similar to the temples of the sun found in Cuzco and in Pisac, both of which are semicircular. Bingham described it as a parabolic enclosure wall. Inside the temple is a 5-foot by 8-foot rock platform, smooth on top except for a small portion of its southwest corner. The Serpent's Door in the Temple of the Sun faces 340 degrees just west of north, with the opening affording a view of Huayna Picchu. The temple also has two trapezoidal windows, one facing 65 degrees called the solstice window, and the other one facing 132 degrees called the Kulka window. The northwest edge of the rock platform points out the solstice window to the 15th century June solstice rising sun. The Inca constellation Kulka, the storehouse, can be viewed out the Kulka window at sunset during the 15th century June sunset solstice. There are sculpted stairs with very fine finished stone projecting upward toward space under the Temple of the Sun. This space under the Temple of the Sun forms a grotto that Bingham originally called the Royal Tomb, but there were no bones ever found here to show that it was a burial place. Here's the June solstice at the Temple of the Sun. Note the sunlight is passing through the window of the temple. The building next to the Temple of the Sun must have been important due to the fine stonework Hiram Bingham called it the Nusta Palace, or Palace of the Princesses. The Nusta were unmarried priestesses of Inti, the sun god. Taking the stairs further uphill from the Temple of the Sun, you will enter a cluster of perfectly built houses known as the Royal Palace. Both the perfect masonry and its location near the Temple of the Sun make it likely this is the residence of the Sapa Inca when they stayed at Machu Picchu. It has some small ritual fountains and is surrounded by gardens and terraces. Exiting the city of Picchu through the city wall, you enter a sweeping series of agricultural terraces. These terraces were built with gravel layers underneath the soil to drain the heavy rains and keep crops and soil in place. If you happen to be in Machu Picchu when it rains, you will see the ancient drainage system still works very well, as seen on the right-hand picture. Now you can take a breather and enjoy the scenery of Machu Picchu or take some other hikes around the area. One option is to climb Huayna Picchu. Huayna Picchu is the green mountain seen in all the classic photos of Machu Picchu. As we said before, the name means young peak. If you bought tickets to climb Huayna Picchu, you get a better view of Machu Picchu. The trailhead is near the sacred rock. Huayna Picchu is often called the Stairs of Death because the way up is almost vertical without any handrails or other security measures. But if you are a fit hiker, not scared of heights, you really should consider this climb. So you can check out the fantastic views of Machu Picchu from up here. It is very treacherous, but a very rewarding hike. The Temple of the Moon is a small cave just off the return trail below Huayna Picchu. The purpose of the temple is uncertain, and the moon may have had nothing to do with it. At this point, another hiking option is to go up to Inti Punku, the Sun Gate, for more photos. On this hike, you will also go past the Guardian House, so you can take a photo of the classic view there if you still want to. The Sun Gate Inti Punku is a moderate uphill climb from the entrance of Machu Picchu, but if the weather is good and you still want to take a photo, it takes about 30 to 40 minutes one way to get there. You will pass by the Guardian House, so you may also want to take the classic Machu Picchu photo from here. Now, while photographing, you'll of course want to get the standard views you often see, but you should also try to go explore some to get other viewpoints to get a unique or slightly different perspective. This view is framed by some trees, and it has also the right side of Huayna Picchu mountain backlit, so you can see the outline of the mountain. It's not just blended in shadow. So this makes this a kind of an interesting shot. This is with a very wide angle fisheye lens just above the level and to the left of the Guardian House. This is a panorama from near the same area. Note at left, you can see some snow-capped peaks off in the distance. To the right, there's a few tourists near the Guardian House taking photos. Up even higher toward another trail known as the Inca Bridge Trail, here's another view. And this llama has its ear fluff backlit by the sun while staring off at Machu Picchu, and I imagine he's rather proud of being part of it all. And as you can see, I'm also using this photo as my background today. So after you get your photos and you chill some, you can also check out the scenery and the wildlife. We'll just quickly run through some of these just to show you what there is. And here's a view from the Putucusi mountain. This is above Aguas Calientes. So this is outside of the park, but it's a side view of Machu Picchu. Otherwise, you can enjoy the scenery and contemplate what you have just seen at Machu Picchu. Also, you can try to understand how Inca gods are portrayed in Machu Picchu's surroundings. Here's the puma face in the side of Huayna Picchu. Here are the agricultural terraces of Machu Picchu, as seen from Huayna Picchu, and the artist's conception of a condor in flight at Machu Picchu. Now, you can't really see this because it's upside down, so we'll invert it. And so that's more clearly shows the image of the condor in flight. This is the powerful long lizard in Machu Picchu. And here you can see it a little better, the long lizard. Now we'll talk about the dark side of Machu Picchu. The following is information just for your awareness, not to frighten you away. If you're thinking of going to Machu Picchu, don't let this change your mind. Remember, millions of people have safely visited Machu Picchu through the years. The best months to travel to Machu Picchu are the winter months, the dry season, usually May to September, but rain can still occur, so rain ponchos may be needed. However, usually the showers are brief and activities resume, including some nice photos as the clouds clear up. But the summer rainy season is not so good. In fact, Machu Picchu and the Inca Trail are usually closed for the month of February to tourists. Now, this is what rain can do in the summer months. The mudslides. On January 29, 2010, nearly 400 people were stranded in Aguas Calientes, required evacuation by helicopter when summer rains from the river flooded the town. Tourists helped place sandbags and stones to try to contain the water from flooding the village. There weren't enough hotel rooms. Many were left to sleep outdoors. Some hotels and restaurants raised their prices, and tourists ran out of money since the ATMs were emptied out of cash. Some tourists slept in train cars. Carol Schultz of Niagara Falls, New York, commented while waiting to be flown out by helicopter, "It's been an adventure, a bit more than what we bargained for." It took several weeks for the Peruvian government to repair the railroad tracks washed out by mudslides. Officials also closed the Inca Trail at this time because a mudslide had killed 2 people. Now here's a list of some other incidents that have happened. And I'm not going to read all of these. Again, remember that millions of people visit each year. And so over this 10-year period, there's been a lot. These are 1 in a million cases. I would like to point out, uh, 2016, the German tourist, age 51, who should have known better, died in posing for a photo on a ledge in a restricted area. He passed his camera to another tourist and asked him to take a photo of him while he jumped up, but instead he fell into the gorge below. Then, July 2018, two trains collided on tracks between Ollantaytambo and Aguascalientes. 10 passengers were injured, 5 were seriously injured. There were no fatalities here. The Peru rail train ran into the back of an Inca rail train. Now, this really would have been it about the dark side of Peru. There wouldn't have been anything else to say except for this year, 2020. January this year, Machu Picchu was damaged by tourists who faced prosecution, deportation, fines. January 12, 2020. 6 tourists in their 20s and 30s. There were 2 Brazilians, 2 Argentines, 1 French, and 1 Chilean, were found at 5:50 a.m. illegally inside the sanctuary of Machu Picchu by the National Police of Peru. The 6 now stand charged of vandalization, defecating in the Temple of the Sun, and causing a stone to fall from 20 feet high in the temple to the floor, cracking it. They face deportation, jail terms of up to 4 years, denial of future entry to Peru, and fines of $1,000 US for vandalizing the Peruvian National Heritage Site. Now we have a video to say farewell to Cuzco and Machu Picchu. So we finish our virtual Peru tour much the same way as we began it 3 weeks ago with El Contrapasa. Now we're going to say goodbye to Peru with images along with the song called Contigo Peru. This means with you, Peru. I've included subtitles with the English translation of the lyrics for you.
Cuando despiertan mis ojos y veo que sigo viviendo contigo, Perú. Emocionado, doy gracias al cielo por darme la vida contigo, Perú. Eres muy grande, lo seguiré haciendo, pues todos estamos contigo, Perú. Sobre mi pecho llevo tus colores y están mis amores contigo, Perú. Somos tus hijos y nos uniremos y así triunfaremos contigo, Perú. Unida la costa,
Unida la costa,
unida la sierra,
unida la sierra,
unida la selva contigo, Perú. Unido el trabajo,
unido el trabajo,
unido el deporte,
unido el deporte,
unidos el norte, el centro y el sur. A triunfar,
peruanos,
que somos hermanos,
que somos hermanos.
que se haga victoria nuestra gratitud. Te daré la vida y cuando yo muera me uniré en la tierra contigo, Perú.
Vamos allá.
Te daré la vida y cuando yo muera me uniré en la tierra contigo, Perú. Unida la costa,
Unida la costa,
unida la
unida la sierra,
unida la selva contigo, Perú. Unido el trabajo,
unido el trabajo,
unido el deporte, unidos el norte, el centro y el sur.
Toma, toma.
A triunfar, peruanos, que somos hermanos, que se haga victoria nuestra gratitud. Te daré la vida y cuando yo muera me uniré en la tierra contigo, Perú. Te daré la vida y cuando yo muera me uniré en la tierra contigo, Perú.
So any questions or comments? And thank you very much for joining our course.